Before I go into this discourse, as it flows, you may notice that it was compiled, over some hours where I had opportunity to concentrate on it. So it may sound like I'm starting from the beginning at certain points and where I'm flowing at certain points. But either way, I want to introduce you to this Saturn retrograde discourse. And no matter what we discuss, because the topic here is Saturn, everything, and I mean everything, has to do with our character. Character is everything with Saturn. Accountability comes to mind as well, because we're headed toward the expression of our freedom. And we know now that with our freedom, accountability, and moral commitment, it must go with it. We must not leave it behind. Saturn has the delays, the stops, the blocks, the holds, until we mature, until we show that we're responsible and that we learn our lessons. Saturn is who we should always show enthusiasm for. It helps us to come to maturity. It helps us to get grounded and realistic about our approach to what we expect to create in life. And that saves us from the tragedy of entitlement. Understand? So, with listening to this discourse, I want you to keep that in mind. Also, I encourage you to sign up and register for your natal birth chart reading concerning Saturn retrograde, also Capricorn full moon, as these are the most recent. And there are many other points to go over in the natal birth chart that you may want to get an insight into for you, your loved ones, your children, or whoever else you may care for. Also, be sure daily, especially weekly, to go by my website at www.the-infamous-astrologist.com, and you want to go to the section titled The Verdant Garden of Abu el-Khidr, okay? The Verdant Garden of Abu el-Khidr. That is where I have blogs on a regular basis where I can go into detail about things. And it's much more convenient than the posts that I put up or sending messages directly, to those out there in the community. Feel free to share the website or content that you may find on there. There is no problem with that. I encourage it. And thank you for your support. Like, share, subscribe, show your support. Thank you very much. I'm happy that all of you are here. And let's prepare our minds for Saturn retrograde, the infamous astrologist. You heard? Now, there will be a Mercury retrograde July 17th until August 11th, 2025 in Leo. It will briefly enter into Virgo. This is at the beginning of the Saturn retrograde. Also, at the end of Saturn retrograde, there will be another Mercury retrograde, November 9th to November 29th in Sagittarius and Scorpio. Now, there's a significance to this if we are paying attention to the patterns. Virgo and Gemini are key to the timeline. Virgo being at the South Node, refinement, the number 9 Hermit card, which is giving us the sober disposition in the self to realize deeper meaning, clarity, and separation from attachments, addictions, and that which misleads our spirit. And we have Gemini, that is presenting a lesson of duality with Uranus in the year ahead for 7 years, changes the context of how we are evolving through lessons of duality, which means wisdom and love as conclusions every time. Wisdom and love leads to unity. So Mercury begins his retrograde and Mercury ends it. Beginning at Leo, what are we expressing? And how are we expressing? What we are expressing and how we are expressing is founded upon Cancer. And Cancer is the status of the inner child. It is the status of the inner child. Leo is the expression and message of the inner child. We have to call the mind, the heart, soul, urge expression with Mercury as well. It is the intention of why we have the impulse to communicate, to relate, to connect. It is the filter that causes us to imply and infer things in particular ways. The heart, soul, urge expression. That has to remain a point of revelation for us as Saturn enters retrograde. Because at the beginning of the retrograde is where we have the strongest shift. And that shift can be startling, but because the retrograde of Mercury follows behind it, it allows us to clear up any complications in how we're delivering what we're reading from the heart, from the soul, so that there can be clarity in what we're discovering about our karma as Saturn goes into retrograde. It's a clearing up. Gemini has to be a part of that, and Virgo has to be a part of that, Virgo being the South Node. We are rebirthing the self. We are rebirthing the self, the Virgo at the South Node. And Gemini, we are learning to free the mind, to reestablish critical thought, free thought. And it takes free thought, it takes a free mind, it takes critical thought to conclude properly, accurately, what has taken place in your life, what it means, what it's intended for. Everything is here to accommodate the arrival at our freedom. That retrograde giving deep insight as we also go direct with Juno out of Scorpio, which is our exit out of the wilderness. The exit out of the wilderness, we will be picking up on details that we missed on the way in to the wilderness. On the way into the wilderness, you're full of confusion, burden, baggage. Your eyes are moving and shifting all over the place, full of excitement and passion, zeal, righteous anger. But now that there were things that were learned, and we have the clear sight on accountability and moral commitment on the way out, Mercury retrograde allows us to capture opportunities and details that we did overlook or miss in our first passing. And coming out of Scorpio, that is Juno, it is finalizing what it takes for us to transform or transmute the points of powerlessness in our life, the points in our life where we have come to the end of our power or the end of what we can do about something. So this Mercury retrograde is really helping us with our mindset to adjust to that exit and all that was learned during the Scorpio Juno retrograde. Saturn retrograde 2025, beginning July 12th until November 27th. September 1st, Saturn will re-enter Pisces. This is for the notes. Remember this as we go over this discourse. Saturn retrograde is very important. This is the time where open and active karma slows down, and we have to complete the karmic lessons that already have been open, homing in on the details. That is the stop of time. That is the stop of the time continuum, where we get grace as karma slows down for us to deal with the karma that's already on our table. And karma is education. It's education. This is where we want to adjust our mindset and our attitude, open our minds to get into the modality of knowing it's time to refine. It's time to get the oil change, get the tune-up, to polish, to clean, to adjust. This is not the time to be anticipating forward motion. This is not the time to be anticipating movement in the timeline. This is where we have to show a sense of presence with the loads that we have before us. Getting deeper into comprehending, understanding what it means, what it's serving, why it had to manifest, what it's teaching us, where it's taking us. Tuning into the self. What have I learned from this? What should I have learned from this? Why did I make the decisions that I did? This is a time to really understand the self from a karmic perspective as we relate to discipline, order, structure, obedience, character especially. What has our character caused and manifest for us? Retrograde season is upon us. You know, once Saturn goes retrograde, the outer planets, one by one, they start going retrograde. All right? From fall season unto spring, the outer planets are in retrograde. This is the time of year, even though it feels like the summer just began, this is the time of year where we want to turn inward, not outward. Follow me. 6 months. Understand that, 6 months. Half of the year is an esoteric focus. Half of the year is an exoteric focus. We are no longer in an exoteric focus. You have to now start shutting down the exoteric perceptions, and you have to now open up the esoteric perceptions. You have to start looking inward for all interpretations, even though that is the basis of our spiritual journey. What I mean is, do not expect progression in timeline. Do not expect movement in timeline while the outer planets are retrograde, because that is not the point. You have to now expect progression on the inner timeline, the inner evolution, the inner movement, the inner direction, the inner motion. And that's what sets the basis for the manifestation of outward progression that you will see or realize in your life, because we have taken the time to do that. The year is always split in half when it comes to progression. Understand, this does not mean that opportunities or movement will not take place. A timeline does not move for us karmically, progressively, in a physical sense, while the outer planets are in retrograde. It's about review. This is when you rotate your tires, you get your tune-up, you get the oil change, you clean your gun, you take it apart, and you clean every part of that gun. Understand? Introspect. Saturn retrograde is going to bring up karmic altered realities. Don't fall apart. You got to know this, okay? As long as Saturn is retrograde, isolated karmic tests and trials are going to come, and it is simply examinations, checkpoints, for you to realize where you have prepared yourself or not, where you have gained competence spiritually about your personal authority, your ability to command and maneuver, navigate choppy waters as it relates to emotional situations, your authority versus another's authorities, you standing in what jurisdiction in another's jurisdiction. But we need to always remember that authority moves power. Power doesn't move authority. Authority moves power. Power can only move authority criminally. When power acts without authority, it is criminal. Saturn teaches us to put authority ahead of our power. Understand? So that we will not be out of jurisdiction with what we do and what we say. That's the point. So we learn to not move messy, to have accountability, responsibility, obedience. Obedience. Did we learn? This is going to have to do with your identity and your imagination. Saturn is going to create tests and examinations to see, did you learn yet? Are you the authority of your imagination? What happens if somebody says that's a stupid idea? What happens if somebody who you really like or who you really want to be around you for emotional support, they abandon you because you decided to be yourself? What happens if you realize who you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to be doing? As soon as you stand up to do it, everybody leaves you. What if you lose something that you really want or you really like because you entered the path of commitment to yourself? What if doing the right thing means war? What if being true to yourself means war? What if? What if you are threatened with isolation, threatened with abandonment, threatened with rejection? Will you sell your soul to get out of this situation? Will you sell the truth? Will you become someone who you're not so you don't have to suffer being alone? this is going to come back up. Did you learn? Are you the one who's controlling how you perceive things? Do you interpret your reality? Or does somebody else interpret it for you? Does your imagination belong to you or does it belong to somebody else? Whose identity is yours? Do you realize what your identity is and the status that comes with it? This identity thing is a serious thing. It's a serious thing. And I bring it up often about the status of Negro, Black, Colored, African American, and I only use that personally so that you can understand it. It applies to you too. There's a fictitious character. There's the incorporated self, the legal entity that is subject to corporate policy. That is a walking surety bond for somebody else to benefit off of. Your identity directly correlates to your nationality, the one that comes with status. It is part of the natural self. The natural self that is not a citizen. The citizen is a ward of state, a debtor, surety, scapegoat, the burden bearer. The natural person is a different identity and different status, and we need to be aware that there are both with us. I'm not telling you which one to choose, but I'm telling you now there's two personhoods. And as I began to explain, Negro, Black, Colored, African American, none of these are nationalities. None of these come with status. None of these recall who our forefathers are. None of it. Correctly, I'm an Asiatic, Moabite, Hebrew, Moor. That's my proper nationality and status. And there is much that comes with that. And we are at the beginning of that claim as a collective. You too should be at the beginning of your claim from your household demographic too, as natural persons. Because this corporate wave has claimed all peoples under the United Nations. And given all caps letters to every one of you, registering you at the Vatican for more wealth than you could ever swim in. That Aries Saturn transit, when it goes direct motion through Aries for the 2.5 years, this is a time where if you don't know the difference in your identity and status, you're going to suffer the fear of feeling restricted, controlled, restrained, limited, dominated, ruled over, and everything else like a product, like property. 14th Amendment was a blind spot. The Asiatic, Moabite, Hebrew Moorish nationals who were enslaved were heirs of the estate that those same settlers occupied to do commerce in. And through the 14th Amendment, it was set up so that their own consent would subject them to different interpretation or status, which puts them under the jurisdiction of corporate policy, posing as constitutional law of a democracy, which is supposed to be a republic, which that can never happen in a republic. But through ignorance, consent is obtained, and you are now answering to Negro, Black, Colored, African American. You no longer have right as heirs to your forefathers' estate or status or jurisdiction, because you decided of your own free will to answer to the wrong name and status. You no longer are a free national. You no longer are a natural person. It's an illusion, a flattery to be called citizen. Which I'm not saying that nobody should be a citizen, but why would you trade willingly the status of being an Asiatic, Moabite, Hebrew, Moorish national, aboriginal of this Americas, not of Africa, and trade that for citizenship? You're trading you're trading gold for you're trading a bar of gold for a rock in doing so. This same illusion is over you, no matter what your nationality is. It's the same with you, because every human, every person, let me not say human, because human means monster, and you can look this up. Legally, it means monster. Okay? But every person or natural person has inalienable rights according to the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, according to a republic. Revealing and exposing why is the desire all the time to propose this corporation posed as a nation as being democratic rather than republic. Abraham Lincoln had a real crisis on his hand in the 1860s. How do you tell France, where this corporation was first registered, that you can't pay the war debt? And then you end up losing status, which is why it had to be registered again in Puerto Rico, which then was called Boricua, and then Guam. It's a corporation that was first registered with France. Not a nation, not even a country, a corporation. Converting slaves into citizens was brilliant to spread the burden of debt to those who would volunteer as debtors in surety bonds to escape the crisis. Gemini-Uranus transit, we're going to see through a lot of illusions that are over our minds, that have been prevailing over our minds. Take the example from so-called black folks, how we have been parroting around calling ourselves Negro, black, and colored, and neither one of those are nationalities. African American, which started with the Spanish Inquisition, 322, 5013C registry, secret society, Skull and Bones, Yale University of modern time, through persuasion of Jesse Jackson to revive the terminology of African American, because the Spanish Inquisition had a full awareness of the status of those who are called Negro, colored, black, Asiatic, Moabite, Hebrew, Moors, duping them by bootlicking Negro Christian preachers and politicians, slick politicians, duping them out of their status, duping them out of their identity into subjugation. Take it from us and look where that has gotten us. Black this and black that and black this and black that. It's a title, social designation, that has exhausted its opportunity to prove something of integrity or goodwill in modern times. It has been plagued with misrepresentation, infiltration, false narratives, dirty politics, and self-undoing. It's a dirty shirt to discard. And the real identity comes also a recollection of our obligation to life and society, community, the generation, honoring our forefathers. So take it from us. During the Saturn retrograde, let's bring to the forefront of our mind how we have been doing with relating to authority figures and also those in our life who have a karmic hold on our expression. At times we have karmic masters in our life, and I don't want us to overlook that or miss the opportunity in that. These karmic masters can look like persons who you have no choice but to figure it out with. They are the persons in your life where you have to learn to get along, to make peace, to make it work. And these are usually people who have a great deal of competence, strength, authority, responsibility, maturity. Most of the time, someone who's a little older or higher in rank of hierarchy. And what they do is they have a natural way of exposing our immaturity, our impulsiveness, our complacency, exposing our lack of accountability. That could be directly from their feedback. It also can be from realizations that you have in comparison of yourself to them and the way that they do things. Are you realizing that a teacher has manifest in front of you? Someone who's showing you how to use Saturn in your life properly. appropriately. In synastry, this more than likely would be a person who has Saturn natal or Saturn transit that's influencing the house where you experience that person in interaction or influence. For example, let's say karmically you have to learn how to be responsible with finances. So you end up tied in some way karmically to a person who's very disciplined and frugal about their finances. And they get to see how you do with your finances. And they see that you may be impulsive. You may be a spendthrift. You may blow the bank, get behind all the time, careless. Okay? And they may question you. They may give you advice. Or you may feel awkward realizing how well they're able to control their finances, but you aren't. It's the same with work ethic. You may show up to work late all the time, lack accountability, or passing up the opportunity to develop yourself, show commitment, stamina, staying power, discipline. But this person does it naturally. And it exposes where you have neglected to develop yourself, where you have neglected to perfect your character in some way. And it becomes a revelation. And karmically, you see that if you watch this person, if you study this person, you can learn some things to take with you. This is usually a karmic bond that has a season. And those karmic bonds with seasons, it's there to catch your character up. It's there to catch your strength up, your sense of accountability and obedience, so that where you are headed, you could be successful. So this retrograde very well could be a final test of, have you learned from this authority? Have you learned from this person yet? Were you paying attention? Can you be trusted now with the greater portion of your destiny? Can you inherit now a higher level of responsibility and duty so that you can have greater fulfillment in your life and status that goes with it? Well, if you were watching, if you were paying attention, if you were receiving the lesson, if you were seeing the other person as the teacher and not an offender, not someone to project your insecurities or your fears or limitations at, but instead humble yourself, humility. Humility is the first step to becoming a student. If we have that humility, we have nothing to worry about. So Saturn retrograde could be a review concerning those things. With Saturn going retrograde in Aries, also retrograde in Pisces as it returns in the retrograde, we have things to consider karmically, and we have things to consider about where we're showing accountability. A detail that's consistent with this retrograde is Juno going direct in Scorpio at the same time, finding its way out of Scorpio. With Juno finding its way out of Scorpio, it is our commitment that now has acknowledged and embraced accountability, and moral commitment to the idea of freedom that we have ahead. In retrograde, our commitment was to the wilderness that we found ourselves in concerning our lower nature, our impulses that were not managed, that were not addressed, that were not healed or refined. We had to realize accountability and moral commitment concerning those things. Righteous anger provoked and revealed to us through the Cancer Mars transit, retrograde transit. It showed us where we abandoned moral commitment, where we justified violating the thresholds, the line in our morals and values because our anger justified it. Our righteous anger justified it. No, not so. We have something to learn. We cannot justify violation of the moral law of Yemayah, the Divine Mother, Divine Feminine, the Constitution of the matriarchal Divine Feminine. We cannot justify it because of our feelings or because of righteous anger, entitlement, or perceptions of injustice. We still must express who we are, consistent with the divine image. Made he, her, in the image and likeness of God. So as Saturn stations retrograde, we know that accountability, responsibility, infrastructure, discipline, obedience, character, strength, these are the things that we have to review within the self. Where the realization of that comes from, we must know. Scorpio Juno. That's where the realization comes from. Scorpio Juno. In the wilderness, which came after deliverance. The inevitable circumstances, karmic circumstances, fate, that realigns us with our destiny, our identity, our timeline, which requires for Uranus to step between the self and what we have attached to of our desires. This is consistent with the South Node Virgo, number 9, Hermit card, Divine Masculine, which works against the detriment of Venus. With all things in consideration, there's always a consistency with what's being expressed in heaven. The water signs, this trine, Jupiter, anticipation of Saturn returning back to Pisces, and Juno's exit out of Scorpio. These are 3 points of salvation. Salvation prepares us for the entry into the reality of freedom. Cancer, the salvation with the self. Scorpio, salvation with others. Pisces, salvation with the world. And that is usually through forgiveness and healing. Jupiter will be transiting through Cancer the entire time that we have this retrograde. And it's not without reason. Remember that Juno's exit out of Scorpio, it includes two new commitments: accountability and moral commitment. Where is moral commitment? That is Cancer, Jupiter. Where is accountability? That is Saturn, Aries, and Aries as well as Pisces in the retrograde. That is our exit from the wilderness. Do we understand? Our exit from the wilderness includes aligning with these two commitments on the way out of Scorpio. And because it's on the way out of Scorpio, it is part of how we transform. It is part of how we transmute. And transformation and transmutation is always towards empowerment. And that empowerment is realigning us with the consciousness of Aquarius. Aquarius Pluto transit is where we are. We understand. Concerning Cancer Jupiter and the moral commitment, it opposes who we were in the Capricorn Pluto transit and what we had to close out of those traits and characteristics. That is the ruthlessness that we learned, the insensitivity, ambition, the do or die mentality, survival of the fittest, thugging, insensitivity, desensitizing ourselves intentionally in order to progress or ascend the corporate ladder. Climbing the corporate ladder, a ruthless task, a morally deprived mission, a commitment that goes against the matriarchal constitution within the self, divine feminine. Let me clarify while I'm at this, divine feminine has nothing to do with power of females, nor does matriarchy. Divine feminine is one half of the being of every person who realizes the self. Matriarchy is the true constitution of the self because it includes compassion, understanding, love, the higher frequencies of the self. Formlessness. Matriarchy has been mispronounced, misrepresented by feminist perversions and ideals of high heels on top of skyscrapers, of the female principle, in correlation with corporate ideals, corporate pursuits, and corporate ambitions. Matriarchy has nothing to do with that, the divine feminine. It is a divine authority from Cancer, whose civil expression is through Libra. The divine through Cancer, the civil through Libra. And that is the illuminated aspects of such, not the shadow aspects of such. Feminism is a contradiction to matriarchy. Let's understand that. So we are reviving the authority of matriarchy in the self, in every person. We're reviving it. That is to realize that the constitution of the self the natural self is Cancer, the luminary. Lunar force and insight. Motherly will and intuition. The consciousness of the Divine Mother. The authority of compassion. The authority of care. The authority of love. Advocacy, intervention. Provision of security. Sustaining of security. Defending of the weak or impaired or incapable. When this part of ourself is revived, that is matriarchy within the spirit. It becomes the constitution of the soul, and the constitution of the soul is the supreme law of the land. Land being the self, the mass, the density. When matriarchy is the supreme constitution of the land or of the self, we overcome ruthlessness. When patriarchy, through Capricorn, is the constitution of the self, we do become quite ambitious. We carry the illusion of success, but not without bloodshed, not without violence, not without corruption, not without oppression, domination, and not without dark witchcraft. Understand, these are the things that we're learning to overcome the patriarchy. Overcoming the patriarchy is not to become offended at the natural expression of men or man, or to interpret life as, oh, men are so misogynistic. They're out to get me. Ooh, booga wooga wooga. They're the monster. Here they come. Let me defend myself against all males. It is a necessary aspect of constitution. However, it is secondary to matriarchy. It is secondary because it represents form, rigidity, structure, and infrastructure. It is what contains the matriarchy. It is what preserves matriarchy. It is what defends matriarchy. Understand, matriarchy is at the center. This is necessary to note because we have Pholus transiting Capricorn, which is bringing productive disruptions. And those productive disruptions to Capricorn is allowing us to reform, reshape, restructure our infrastructure of life. We are bleeding out or letting out the Machiavellian aspects of consciousness within the self, the shadow 8. We are also finding who we are outside of the corporate entity, which is represented by Capricorn as well. The corporate entity, the incorporated person, the false person, the created person, the fictitious character, the all caps lettered person on the Social Security card and birth certificate. Pholus is shaking our complacency with identifying with those titles and subjugations. It's shaking it. And as it shakes it, it reawakens and expands our awareness of the divine self, the natural self, which begins with Cancer, the natural self. It expands the awareness of the natural self, that there is a self apart from the corporate entity of the birth certificate and social security number. What's really going to put the vice grip on that realization, of course, will be Aries Saturn transit. Once it goes direct again through Aries, that is when the pressure around the identity through the personality, the first and last name, all caps, it's going to feel like entrapment, imprisonment, limitations, restrictions, dictatorship, domination, control, lack of freedom. But there's an illusion to decode, and the illusion to decode is realization of the natural self and the divine constitution of the self, which begins again with Cancer, the matriarchal compass within the self, the realization of the natal self. This, of course, is consistent with or protected by the constitution of the land through a republic. This is when we will expand our understanding of what the Constitution means and what its original intention was as a republic, seeing through the illusions of the democracy, which fabricates, engineers, produces the illusion of law called corporate policy, posing the illusion of limitations of one's freedom and expression, status, and authority. This is what's coming. What's hosting all of this, these manifestations of duality, is Gemini Uranus. We will get a taste of that until Uranus goes retrograde back into Taurus. And it's necessary that these retrogrades take place back into the last minutes of Pisces with Saturn, the last minutes of Taurus with Uranus. These last minutes helps us to properly close those lessons, properly finish those lessons. And the proper closure, the proper finishing of a lesson is to do so making peace with it, acceptance, clarity, understanding. Because when we hastily run away from a lesson, I just want to get this over with, we're not present with the lesson. And when we're not present with the lesson, inevitably we have to learn it all over again, and that is what karma does. It's an opportunity to reduce the karmic load that we are manifesting ahead. Proper closure. Do we understand this? Do we have peace and acceptance for what we realize it is? That's the proper way to close. Saturn retrograde beginning with Aries, it begins with the identity. With Pisces, it begins with the imagination. The identity and the imagination. Gemini duality is twofold. It rules the personality and the soul. As for Aries, it hosts the personality of Gemini. As for Pisces, it hosts the soul of Gemini. One through imagination and one through cognitive impulse. The heart and the mind. The heart and the mind. Saturn is characterized by its conjunction with Neptune. Being characterized by its conjunction with Neptune, it indicates that there is something dissolving and there's also something manifesting. And with Saturn there, what's being explained is that accountability has to go with closure, and accountability has to go with any entitlements that we have fermenting within the self of what ideals we are forming, of who we are to identify as in the future or become in the future. Without Saturn, they are simple delusions, dreams. Saturn grounds it to reality, and it helps us to list and name what work must go with the faith, what process must go with the expectation of fulfillment, what commitment and duties and responsibilities must go with the free will. The retrograde is so productive. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction allowed us to realize that we are at a point of crisis and duality with the self. The corporate, fictitious character that I have been, according to Capricorn-Pluto transit closure, I realize I have to dissolve my commitment to this expression of myself. I have to dissolve this aspect of the self, who is ruled by policy and fearful impulse. And I have to erect the true identity of the self that I now realize, whose constitution originates with Cancer, divine motherly instinct, lunar light, the soft lunar light, who leads with compassion, love, and understanding, whose will is to advocate, to care, and to protect, and to secure as the basis of my intentions. And we will always find that the Constitution, the actual Constitution that is written for this land by the Moors, who handed this land over to the current settlers, they insisted that if you are to occupy and practice commerce on this land as maritime settlers, you will do so according to a republican constitution, or constitution expressed as a republic, because that is for the natural person. It is in consideration of the natural person, because it is matriarchal wisdom that informs the Constitution, which came from Islamic jurisprudence. There is a conversion of policy to patriarchal interpretation, patriarchal application and adjudication. When mischief enters the heart, when the territories, the societies, the nations are run by such patriarchal will, under the UN, it becomes a global practice that patriarchal policy poses as the illusion of constitution and democracy. And now you have desensitization, you have ruthlessness, you have Machiavellian culture all over the earth, posing as care and interest for you, the person, giving you illusions of free will, illusions of autonomy, illusions of security. This is all being given back to us. Again, I'm arriving at duality. Everything that I speak about will be a duality because that is the context that is being set up by Gemini-Uranus transit. Everything now is a duality. Understand? What is the solution for being posed at the crossroads of a duality? This seems to be a contradiction. This works against this. This works against that. The solution for duality, we have to resort to progressive Gemini. And progressive Gemini, when it comes to duality, it arrives at two things: wisdom or love. Wisdom or love. Wisdom or love. Wisdom or love allows us to see singularity, the oneness, to see God through the prism and to see the prism through the eye of God. That refers back to Pisces. That refers back to Pisces. Look how consistent all of these transits are. Jupiter at Cancer is walking us into the codes of freedom. Mind you, at the end of the Saturn retrograde, both Mars and the Sun will be in Sagittarius, which is the reality and expression of our ideal of freedom. However, between that time, the retrograde is what is preparing us to be accountable to that experience, to be prepared for that experience and conditioned to handle that experience, to honor the experience. And it starts with Cancer Jupiter. Cancer Jupiter is what we have been missing as corporate entities. As corporate entities, we became heartless, ruthless, lacking understanding and compassion, sensitivity and care. We lost the human touch. We also lost the focus that the only true fulfillment and happiness for the human being is in family. That is the only place where there is true happiness and fulfillment, is in family. Everything about what we were doing here in the earth under corporate will was anti-family, anti-marriage, parental success. And parental success is mother and father rears child into a productive and competent citizen, providing service to the society. Feminism worked directly against that. Liberalism worked directly against that. And it was full contradiction to matriarchal will. Matriarchal will is 100% about the priority of family, relationships, and the success of children, the happiness and security of children, the security of society. Security of society is not fulfilled through control of the people, but through services and infrastructure that honors the needs and weaknesses of the people. We missed the target. A restoration is taking place, where Cancer algorithm of the self can now be poured into and emphasized so that it expands through Jupiter against our indulgence and the Capricorn expression of the self, the ibex who is scaling the mountain ambitiously, leaving behind the moral compass and our commitment to it, and the accountability that we have to show to family and society as a principle. Get to the bag. Get to the bag. That is no longer the anthem. Get money. That is no longer the anthem. Worship money. That is no longer the anthem. That energy will not be tapped into without swift justice and karma. Our expressions now turns to family, visualizing family, longing for family, dreaming of family, pouring into community, serving that which promotes and produces, enables, secures, advocates for, enriches the family experience. Neptune does highlight ideas and themes of nationalism. And those themes of nationalism, border issues, come with it. Claims of legitimacy, status, identity, demographic, race. These are hot topics today. And Saturn is bringing the burden of karma concerning these matters of borders, nationalities, identity, status, so on and so forth. But overall, what we need to notice that is a common theme is the return home. Everybody's returning home. From nation to nation, there are great exiles and returns home. Who are you? Who are your people? Go there. This is for a reason. Because that's where the transformation really takes place. That's where we remember why we are striving and what we strive for. It's also where we remember that that is where our primary duty is at. It's to the home. Charity starts at home. You cannot leave your house a mess and go to somebody else's house and try to run it. You cannot fail to call the right shots in your own home and then go to somebody else's house having entitlements and expectations. You can't fix a leak on somebody else's house and at your house, you still got a leak in the roof. You still have not fixed the wiring. You still got plumbing to do. You still didn't cut your grass, but you're cutting everybody's grass around the neighborhood. You're in everybody else's business. Go home. Go the fuck home and tend to your home, wherever that is, whatever that means, according to your natural and true status. It's not about race, it's about status. Who has what status? With status comes jurisdiction. With jurisdiction comes adjudication. We're going to learn these things. That's where we're at. Jupiter Cancer, yes, there's a great migration of homecoming, nationalism, national pride and identity, going back to the mothers. Everyone's going back to their mothers. And what I mean by their mothers is reverence of wounds that bore you. Where did you come from? Who are your people? This is where charity has to start. This is where values has to start. This is where the constitution of the Divine Mother Yemayah has to be remembered through Cancer. This is where lunar power began. The fourth house. It all started in the fourth house. It's consistent with Saturn retrograde Aries, the identity. It's also consistent with Saturn retrograde Pisces. Restrictions on the imagination, restrictions on the thought. Restrictions on the imagination, restrictions on the thought from fear, from guilt, emotional codependencies, limitations of imagination and thought because you can't get approval from other people. You can't get co-signed by other people. You don't want to be rejected. You don't want to be left behind or abandoned. So you close your imagination. You don't dream anymore. You go with what you feel people will accept you for. And that's what we cannot do anymore. You have to be the true self, the real self, even if it means infamy. As Saturn passes to the last degrees of Pisces, we will expect to demonstrate our mastery of these lessons. Last degrees are mastery. The last degrees of any sign or algorithm, it indicates mastery. And where there is mastery, we have to show competence. We have to show understanding. We have to show wisdom. We have to show accountability also. And that's what we're expected to demonstrate during the retrograde of Saturn in Pisces. Can we demonstrate that concerning how we utilize the power of our thoughts and imagination, or rather not they are constricted or refined or confined by the ideals of others or the limitations of illusions over our identity. Pisces indicates fears, your natal fears, guilt, your natal guilt, generational curses, and the limitations that those generational curses pose. So, karmic realities will manifest so that you can get an examination for yourself to see, have I learned this or not? Did I get this right? Have I mastered this lesson? We will get to see and confirm, rather or not, we learned. Did you learn to protect your heaven? Are you controlled and moved by guilt and shame? Does your imagination alter when guilt and shame is proposed to you? Do you allow others to make you feel guilty about your thoughts and imagination, or fearful about testing the limitations of your thoughts and imagination? That's where your power as a creator begins, with the imagination. It all starts there. It's what seeds the initiation of creation. It's the essence from whence all that you create or all that has been created, it is where it began. So if there are blockages and limitations there will be blockages and limitations in the manifestation overall. We are tapping back into the unlimited power of imagination and manifestation. So we have to go back over these lessons. But this time, the imagination has to be consistent with the matriarchal divine feminine Cancer, not the patriarchal divine masculine Capricorn. The imagination for Capricorn was your imagination belongs to the corporate ideal, the corporate expression, where your entire being and your intelligence, your creativity, it was for a 9 to 5, it was for a career, it was for a job, it was for money. But now we're getting bigger than that. We are pulling down heavenly codes. The kingdom of heaven is coming down. And that is where our imagination is for service of humanity. That is a different intention. The natural person, the divine self. And this is the concept of self that stands outside of the limitation of corporate images of us that we were intimidated and provoked to stay subjected to. Job scare. You'll lose your job if you dream like that. You'll lose your job if you think like that. You'll starve if you think like that. You'll starve if you dream like that. If you lose your friends, you'll lose your status. If you're not honest with this person, they won't help you to get that promotion. There are so many limiting factors behind what we used to refer our imagination to. Through Cancer, it is not bound. It is endless. It is the imagination of the mother with the child. The imagination of the mother with the child, it is inspired, motivated, expanded and illuminated by love. Purely by love. Love and compassion. That is a limitless imagination. A limitless imagination. When Saturn first goes direct, it exposes us to the scope of duty, the scope of responsibility, the scope of accountability, the scope of process, the scope of commitment, the scope of obedience. We got to see the scope through Pisces of what it will mean if we are to free our imagination. This is what it's going to require. When Saturn got to Aries at Neptune, if we are to renew our mind and renew our image, renew our identity, this is what it's going to require. The retrograde is to go over the details and nuances of those requirements and address them. Get into it, clean it up, to actually do the work of those requirements. And in the direct motion, it's to see the gains and benefits of that commitment. Direct motion. So as you see, there are 3 phases to every Saturn retrograde. What's coming after the Saturn retrograde? Jupiter, a few months after, will end up heading into Leo, where expression expands. So as you can see, it's necessary to reestablish the proper constitution within the spirit from Capricorn over to Cancer instead, which is the constitution of the natural person. The constitution of Capricorn is the constitution of the corporate person. There are 2 persons that we are going to realize, and we are emphasizing the natural person this time around. Yes, these are legal terms, but the legal term is always going to be consistent with the spiritual meaning and expression. Understand that. That will always be the case, because law and spirituality is one. It is not separate. So this preparation has to take first, because expansion of expression, it has to come from the right place. And we are aligning it with the right place. The Divine Mother. Expressing ourselves from the lap, from the breast of the Mother. Understand, Cancer. The Divine Mother is nurturing us to full strength, nurturing us to full capacity. Cancer represents the nurturing breast. Jupiter is a big breast in this case. This is a heavy nurturing, a hefty nurturing of the original self, the divine self, the natural self. When Jupiter gets to Leo, the expression of the self is magnificent. That is when we create We create what is awe-inspiring. Understand? We create what leads to a dramatic inspiration and motivation for all. The things that we produce are like bright shining lights. That's where we're in the action, the active of the natural person in society, creating exactly what we need according to our memory of the Divine Mother's voice through Cancer. But Neptune is in Aries by its, in retrograde. We also will understand that our ideal of the self, or the self as a visionary, with Saturn in retrograde, it helps us to be sharper in the details and closer to a realistic outlook with what we're projecting as our goals or our intentions. It's also going back over what it means to initiate or create from nothingness, knowing that the basis of that is the richness of the imagination, the limitlessness of the imagination, the purging of the imagination of fear, shame, and guilt. The more we can do that, the greater our creations will be, the more accurate our manifestations and creations will be. Love, compassion, understanding, goodwill, good intention. This is what increases and expands the confidence and conviction in that which we intend to create. Because we're pushing that against fear, shame, and guilt. Understand? These are some things to consider with the retrograde of Saturn, Aries, and Saturn, Pisces, retrograde motion. And I can't emphasize enough that identity is the main thing, because status is the thing that we will learn to clarify, and the jurisdiction that goes with the status, who we really are. We are dissolving the illusion of the global corporate infrastructure that cosplays as practicers or practitioners of law by only pushing corporate policies that keep subjugation and control and limitation, fear, propaganda over the people. But once Uranus reveals to us the true identity of the natural person, there is much that we have to learn to be competent in that personhood of the natural self. And we have to accept that we thought we knew, but we didn't.